All right. Hello and welcome to a special live episode of Tibet Da Vinci here on a beautiful Sunday morning. I'm really excited today because I am joined by a very special guest, Arcady, who is the CEO of Freewire. Arcady, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about Freewire a little bit?
Thanks, Ricky. Good morning and happy Sunday. My name is Arcady. I'm the CEO and the founder of Freewire Technologies. It's a company that I founded 7 years ago when we identified what we know now is the most critical pain point in the EV charging industry. And it's not the charging station itself. The charging station, in many cases, is a red herring. The real problem is the infrastructure, the utility, and the grid infrastructure behind that charging station. We've moved on as an industry from slow charging to fast, and now the term is ultra fast. Now every consumer, every fleet wants to get their car charged in really 10 to 20 minutes. And you need heavy utility infrastructure to charge that electric vehicle that quickly. The rule of thumb that I like to give people is that two Teslas charging in the parking lot of a Walmart will use as much power as the Walmart itself. So you can imagine the scale of the problem when you get to 10 vehicles, 20, 40 in a parking lot. It's a significant amount of utility infrastructure that our grid simply can't support. Our grid is designed in a very centralized way, not in a decentralized way. And Freewire is developing technologies to try to solve that, to enable and deploy ultra-fast charging on all commercial sites without requiring the utility to step in and build out the infrastructure that we've had for over 100 years. It's a really interesting company. My background, interestingly enough, is not in electric vehicles, is not in engineering or electrical engineering. I spent 7 years prior to founding this company in the hedge fund industry. I was working in investment management, building models and pumping data through models and making investment decisions for pension funds. And personally speaking, I never get the same feeling, or I never got the same feeling in that industry as I do now when I go out and see one of my charging stations and see people charging it and using it. It's just a really tangible, special feeling. And of course, what we're doing is really helping the world transition to electrification of transportation, and that's a really important part of why I'm doing this.
So here's what I'm thinking. Why don't we jump right into the Boost charger, which I think is, let's start tangible, like show off your project,
Yeah.
how your solution will fare. And then from there, we'll go into comments and we'll get into kind of the common questions that people always have about how on earth are we going to charge millions of EVs, which is, to your point, is a very good question. So you want to start there, show off your slide deck and get into the Boost charger, which we were talking about last week?
I'd love to. I'd love to. So I think you're switching over to the slide deck now, and so am I. This is really the headline image of it. This is what it looks like, and it's interesting too. To the average EV driver or to a fleet customer, you might not know the difference, right? You might see this as a charging station and think, wow, this is a really attractive, interesting looking charging station, but it can't be any different than any others. Well, what I can tell you is that it's a complete re-architecture of how EV charging works. So the way EV charging works in the status quo with traditional charging infrastructure is that if you need 150 kilowatts of power to charge a vehicle, you have to get 150 kilowatts from the grid. This system has a built-in buffer, a natural buffer, and that's a large format lithium-ion battery pack that's actually embedded structurally within that charger. And that battery means that you can deploy it on low power infrastructure. So we actually only need about a 20 kilowatt grid connection input. And the system outputs about 150 kilowatts to the vehicle. And the battery in the middle acts as a bit of a buffer. So why don't we go forward a little bit and show you a few slides and what the technology actually looks like. This is opening the kimono, so to speak. So you can see inside that the biggest portion of it and the first important piece is that battery pack. It's a battery pack that we've designed in-house. It's proprietary. We buy cells from some of the largest suppliers on the planet. One of our largest cell suppliers is Envision. This is actually the same exact battery cell that's used in the Nissan Leaf today. So that's the base technology that we work off of, but then we design the pack ourselves. Everything from the battery management system and the thermal management system of it, the mechanical structure of the pack, everything is done in-house. And we've added some real innovations to this pack. So for example, Ricky, I think you know, and many EV drivers know that current generation electric vehicles operate at about 400 volts. And next generation vehicles are coming out at 800 volts, right? So the Porsche Taycan can charge at 800 volts, and then the Lucid that's coming out is going to be able to charge at 800 volts. And so if you're charging from a battery pack to a battery pack, in order to be able to work with both voltages, you typically need two power conversion stages, right? You need to step the power up and down, or boost and buck, or vice versa. What we've done in a really innovative way here is that we actually change the voltage of our battery pack on the fly. So effectively, we're splitting the pack in half and putting it in either parallel or series to make it either a 400 volt pack or an 800 volt pack. That means if you bring one of these new next generation vehicles in, we're boosting power up from 400 to 800. If you bring one of the current generation Nissan Leafs and BMW i3s, we're switching our pack up to 800 volts and bucking it down to 400. So that means we get to reduce one power conversion stage and do this in the most efficient, the quickest, and the most cost-effective way possible. Some real innovation that's just been developed here. And then the system, there's kind of innovations across the rest of the system. We develop our own power converters, so we're actually taking the energy stored in the battery and then doing DC to DC conversion to the battery pack in the car. And we use our own power converters. And by the way, we didn't go with existing technology. Typically, and I think the electrical engineers who are listening to this know, power conversion is done using copper transformers, right? Big chunks of copper is how you convert AC to DC, DC to DC, and so on. We decided that wasn't going to work for us. We used latest generation technology. We developed this using silicon carbide architecture. We're operating these power converters at 99% efficiency. And we produce them at half the cost of any other power converters in the market today. So higher efficiency, higher throughput, lower cost, right? So there's innovations just across the system as a whole. But broadly speaking, it is a low power input, battery buffer, very, very high power output, and software to control all of it. And that's the innovation that we've created in-house here.
So one of the things we talked about last week, there's some comments. I'm going to kind of address them as we go. But so, for example, let's say we want to build a DC fast charger. Typically, do you have that slide that shows the amount of infrastructure that you have to build out to support a DC fast charger?
Yeah.
So if you look here, there are some questions people were asking about Tesla superchargers and stuff. Tesla's a standard. You're going to get questions about that always. But you want to walk us through this right here? This is a good slide.
Yeah, this is a great slide. It really compares what we think is next generation charging infrastructure from last generation charging infrastructure and what it takes to deploy it. So the viewers here might be familiar with a Tesla supercharger or an ABB charger that you might see in the field. What you always forget is that's really not the entire value chain of charging, right? What it takes to deploy that charger is all of the utility infrastructure behind it. And so this is a great example. This is a parking lot of a Walmart in the San Francisco Bay Area. So this Walmart did not have enough available capacity on their existing panels, on their existing transformers to enable ultra-fast charging. Most sites won't. So what they needed to do is first go upstream. They needed to go upstream into the transmission and distribution side of the utility network and assess whether there was capacity on the substation several blocks away to bring new power to the site. Now, they were lucky. There was enough available capacity on that utility substation. That's not always the case. Then they had to bring that new medium voltage service to the site. Medium voltage is defined as 6,000 volts to 21,000 volts. They need to bring that service to the site. And that, Ricky, is a public works project, right? It is what putting cones down, and it's blocking off streets, and it's, there's a lot of work that has to happen there. By the time you get that new medium voltage service to the site, you then have to feed it into a new transformer to step that power down, right? So you're stepping that power down to 480 volt three phase, which is what the rest of the charging infrastructure uses. You then feed that switch gear. Switch gear is where all the breakers, the metering equipment is, all the safety equipment, right? And then and only then do you get that power to the charging station, quote unquote, which is a combination of power cabinet and dispenser. Remember, the thing that you're pulling up into and that cable that you grab, there's not really any electronics inside there, right? That's just a cord management system. Really, it's a very typically large white box that's sitting sometimes behind a fence, sometimes near the dispenser, and that's where the charging station really lives. And all of that work had to go into the site just to get that first electron to that vehicle. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense, typically to install one single ultra fast charger on a site, Ricky. One single ultra fast charger, it's $200,000. $200,000 to get that thing installed in the ground. And so you can start to see how much it costs to deploy banks of these things. This particular site had a very unique problem, right? They were faced with very high energy costs. And some of those energy costs are due to demand charges. Demand charges, Ricky, are the concept of depending on how high your spike goes on your utility bill, you pay a penalty for the height of that spike, right? So if your spike is 100 kilowatts versus the 50 that you typically operate at, you're going to pay a penalty on that extra 50 kilowatts. And that can be very detrimental to charging infrastructure because charging by its nature is peaky, right?
So
you have vehicles that plug in sometimes. You go ahead.
Is that a time of use thing, or is that just generally speaking, whenever you spike in usage at any point?
Time of use is a different concept, but also plays in here. Time of use is the concept that your daytime rates may be more expensive than your nighttime rates, right? And that concept does play here. But that pales in comparison to this concept of demand charges, where most commercial rates are such that you pay a penalty for how high you spike because the utility needs to have the capacity on that site to absorb that spike, right? And you're going to pay for that. So this particular site had very high demand charges. A lot of sites in California do because we're faced, California and New York are some of the highest demand charges across the country. And what they installed was a Tesla power pack and inverter to lower those energy costs down. That's another $200,000 plus installation of a battery just to kind of fight those energy costs down, right? So you can see the amount of infrastructure and work and complexity. And this entire deployment took 18 months to really deploy that first electron to the vehicle. And that's, we can't keep doing that, right? We just can't keep doing that. So what we've developed is a system that uses the site's existing power. So we deploy these things in a matter of hours, right? My fastest deployment has been 2.5 hours, not months, but hours. And we don't require all of the infrastructure behind the charging station that you would typically see today. And that just means we can deploy much more quickly and at a lower cost, Ricky.
So I want to make it really clear exactly the part about this that I love so much. So 20 kilowatts, which is kind of like the fastest level 2 speeds, right? That's what your system is operating at. So you're pulling from the wall at 20 kilowatts, which everyone can support. Like if I have a 7-Eleven franchise and I go, hey, Arcady, I'd love to get a couple of these installed because I could get more electric vehicle owners. I don't have to go rip out concrete and get new infrastructure, as you mentioned, and the cost of that. I could use my current existing infrastructure and support this. The really brilliant part about it is, let's say for an hour there's no EV there. You're still pulling 20 kilowatts from the wall and you're charging your battery up. And then as soon as an EV rolls in, right, then you not only take the 20 kilowatts that you can pull from the wall and you send it directly to the EV, and then the battery is also supplying current. And as a result, you can achieve, what are the fastest speeds that your machine supports?
The fastest speeds that we put out right now is 150 kilowatts, which if you're looking at a typical, an Audi e-tron or a couple of other cars that can support those power levels, you're looking at really being there for 10 to 20 minutes at most, right?
Right.
So really, really fast speeds.
So then let's look at it from the grid's perspective. Before the EV showed up, you were pulling 20 kilowatts, right? And then an EV shows up, you're pulling 20 kilowatts, but the EV is fast charging at 150. And then as soon as he leaves, again, you keep pulling 20 kilowatts, but you're charging your pack back up. That is the beauty of this system. If I was a grid operator, you'd be my best friend, because instead of going from 0 to 150 to these incredible spikes, which are they're so difficult to handle from a grid perspective, you give us a flat line and you buffer the data, you buffer the usage between when a car shows up, when there's no one around, and you handle all that. But to the end user EV operator, it's the same as anything else, but the grid operator becomes your best friend, right?
That's right. That's right. And that's why our second largest customer segment are utilities, right? So these are progressive utilities like American Electric Power, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Southern California Edison. These are utilities that really understand what you just said, which is that if you rolled out fast charging and ultra fast charging at scale using the status quo, you'd cripple grid infrastructure. They don't have the ability to support those kind of power levels at all of these sites. They don't have the ability to be able to absorb all these peaks and valleys that occur. And what you said is we flatten the demand curve. We flatten that curve down. Now,
Right.
the area under the curve is still the same, right? We still need the same amount of electrons, but we just consume them more slowly throughout the day. And that means it's more predictable, right? The utility can now predict what their demand is. And if they
Exactly.
can predict what their demand is, they can turn off peaker plants. They can
Exactly.
lower their base load. And that's saving money, not just for our sites, our customers here, it's saving money for all ratepayers. Because the more
Exactly.
predictable the demand curve is, the lower rates get for all ratepayers. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They love this technology.
So John says the power is not the problem, it's the infrastructure. I'd go one step further and say the problem is the spikes in usage, really, right? So
Yeah.
we could make more power. We could build another power plant. It's business. If there's a need for electricity, people will spring up and provide it. A base load plant, like let's say a nuclear power plant, you can't flip them on and off. They're just outputting hundreds of megawatts or whatever the case might be. You can't really modulate that or turn them, slow them down in any meaningful way. So really, if you just have a stable use, if everyone agreed we're going to use N megawatts a day and just stably use it all day, we'd have no problems. We would be in a totally fine situation. But the problem is we have huge generation from solar, especially in California, where there's like no demand and excess energy. And then we have huge shortages in the evening. These shortages and these pitfalls, that's the problem. And that's where a peaker power plant comes into the equation. Typically natural gas, where they pollute way more than the base load plants. They're typically smaller, and those can be turned on and off. So what Arcady's proposing, like what Freewire provides, is a product that stabilizes that and says we have internal storage, and so we'll just be this ocean, and you just come and take from, you fill from the tap, but the draw from the grid is just a constant, which hopefully that helps to kind of to clarify a little bit. I have a question for you from Bong Hollywood, who is one of our favorite viewers. He says, how much back-to-back cycle ultra fast charging before the battery is drained, and how fast does the battery reload? So maybe that kind of gets into like throughput for a day, really.
Yeah, great question. Let's start very high level and let's dive in deep. So high level, we tell our customers that the throughput here is up to 20 vehicles per day. 20 vehicles per day. And we've seen that in data, by the way. We have fleet customers who are the highest utilization customers on our network, and we see them going through 20 vehicles a day pretty commonly. Typically in public charging installs, you won't see that kind of utilization. That's pretty high utilization. Typically in public charging installs, we see in an order of kind of 4 to 8 charging sessions a day is what we typically see. Now, the reason for that is pretty complex, right? First of all, if you look at the way a vehicle charges, the vehicle's charging curve is not linear. So whereas a vehicle can charge at full power near the top end of its battery, near the bottom end of its battery, the first 0 to 40% or so. The next 40 to 100%, it starts slowing down that charge rate. And it starts slowing it down pretty precipitously. So just look up Tesla Model 3 charging curve on Google right now, and you'll see that after about 40%, the Tesla Model 3's charging curve drops pretty quickly, right? That's first part of this equation. The second part of the equation is that we charge from the grid while we charge the vehicle. So we're always replenishing our own battery pack while we're charging the vehicle. If you look at back-to-back, and plus one more factor here that I just want to point out, there's no such thing as a back-to-back charging session, right? There's always dead time in between. Whether it's you on your cell phone, answering that last text message or email, backing out of your car, the other person comes in, they're fumbling with their keys, they're getting their smartphone out and tapping the credit card reader, right? There's always just kind of dead time, and typically, even in really highly utilized situations, dead time of 10 to 15 minutes is pretty common. So if you kind of combine all those factors, you start to see where the model makes a lot of sense. If you actually had real back-to-back-to-back charging sessions, you can do about 7 or 8 vehicles back-to-back before the battery gets to 0. But realistically speaking, when you look at all the combination of scenarios, 20 vehicles a day is typically what we get. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Also, part of what this would allow us to do, to my mind, currently we have these massive charging stations. Like I was just at the Tesla Fireboss station. The thing is absolutely massive and it's covered in solar. It is like, it's like a look into the future. It's really cool. But I mean, you have to drive to these stations. What I'm thinking is, imagine if instead everywhere you go, you have a couple of these Freewire boost chargers, and that's where you just kind of pull in and say, I wasn't really going to charge, but why not? I'll just top off a little, and you can plug it in. And to your point about utilization, I think what I've typically found is time after I'm done charging. So typically on my road trips, we don't finish lunch before the car is done charging. So you have some dead time where the car is sitting there like telling you, hey, why don't you move? Other people could use this station pretty soon. And there probably will be times when there is a queue. There are people who are waiting to pull in as soon as they can. So really, even if, let's say, for example, there's 100 people in line just constantly back-to-back charging, your speeds, I mean, as the battery drains and eventually was empty, you would just become a 20 kilowatt charger at that point, right? It'd be at like a level 2 charger, worst case scenario. It keeps working.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's...
In the future that we see, and I think this is really important to point out, is we are going to have more charging stations than we have gas pumps today. That is clear to everyone in this industry. 10 to 1 at least. And I think it's going to be significantly higher. I think it's going to be on the order of magnitude of 20 or 30 to 1. Now, we have kind of used up the low-hanging fruit as an industry. So these large sites that you went to, Ricky, and some of the larger sites that folks are used to on this call, these companies like EVgo and Electrify America and Tesla, they chose sites where they might have had enough infrastructure, where it was a little bit easier and more cost-effective to deploy. Those are used up at this point. Now we need to roll out to the mass market, and we need to roll out to convenience stores like 7-Elevens, to coffee shops like Starbucks, to supermarkets like Wawa and Publix, and in some cases to gas stations, right? We need to roll out to BPs and ARCOs and AMPMs. And these sites are not the same sites that you're used to today. These sites don't have any of that infrastructure, don't have any of that available space, frankly speaking, for all of this utility infrastructure that you see here on the screen. But what's going to happen is that the world is in our country is going to have significantly more charging stations, and they're going to be available everywhere. So in your daily commute, Ricky, when you go get your coffee in the morning, when you go to your doctor's office, when you go to work, you're always going to have charging available there. So it's going to move to more of a top-off model, right? You're never going to fully charge your car, because every time you go somewhere, there's going to be a plug. You plug in, you do your task, and then you go out and leave. And so if you think of the world that way, which a lot of people have really bought onto that vision, you start to see why buffered solutions make a lot of sense, right? It's the same concept in a grocery store, right? Do you want to have one very speedy checkout aisle, or do you want to have many checkout aisles with high school students working them, right? It is that same concept, and it always comes back to the point that you need more available ports.
That's very interesting. Yeah, currently it's very much you have to go to a station. Like, you're not going to have a gas station at every grocery store and every convenience store. But with charging, that's exactly what we could have. Yeah. So it wouldn't be that, oh, I'm driving on empty, let me go do a full charge. It's really just kind of, I charge it at home. Somebody mentioned home charging, another thing. Electric vehicles charge at home. Really, I only use infrastructure charging outside when I'm on road trips, which, when I'm on road trips, I have no other choice. But at home, I just come home and I charge. So I think distributed is the future. Everything kind of moves toward more of a distributed model. And that's really what this is. Instead of having a station with 100 charging stations, what if everywhere you went had 2 or 3 charge stations that you could plug into? And if you introduce batteries, you could really help stabilize the grid. We're starting to get to the question that we had in the title of the video, which is, how the heck are we going to charge 1 million EVs? Which I've gotten that question a lot. We make a lot of videos about EVs and solar and stuff, and people ask this question as if everybody will go home at the exact same moment, plug in, and we're just going to overload the grid. But the reality is, my car has a 300-mile range battery pack. I charge every 3 or 4 days. So first of all, you can divide that by a factor of 4. I don't charge but every 4th day. So if everybody is, kind of spurting that out, that's not a big concern. If in the future, somebody mentioned the Teslas, they have mega pack installs on their V3 chargers. So they already have solar and batteries and stuff. So there are probably points in the day where some of these sites could even be kind of energy neutral. But it's a multi-pronged approach. Like you kind of alluded to this, but there's going to be a lot of different factors that maybe we're not fully thinking of. And I like the idea you mentioned about topping off. That's really what we're going to be doing mostly. Everywhere we go now could potentially be a place for us to charge our cars, which was never the previous gasoline model. That we were never going to build gas stations, one or two. That wouldn't make any sense. You'd have to have a huge reservoir, and people would have to come with trucks to refill it. All that's gone. This is just plug into the wall. And you mentioned just how quickly you can get these set up. What if I switch gears here and ask you about somebody had questioned in the comment section about the battery longevity. So you're charging and discharging the batteries quite frequently. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So not as frequently as you'd expect, actually. What ends up happening is when we look at our utilization graphs of all the deployments we have in the field, and by the way, we have over 200 units of product deployed in the field. We in 6 countries, probably just over 25 U.S. states or so. Big Fortune 500 customers from BP on the gas station front to Travel Centers of America, to we have deployments in Japan with the Tokyo Electric Power Company. So we really have a lot of utilization data and a lot of different kind of types of customers and a lot of different regions and markets to really assess this. So what ends up happening is that the battery ends up operating at the top end of its curve, our battery at the top end of its curve the entire time. So you see a sawtooth graph starting to form, right? So it's going from 100 to 80% to 100 to 70% to 100, back and forth and back and forth. Operating at that high end of its curve is good for the battery, right? That actually extends longevity. The other thing to kind of consider here is that our charge rate, so we're pulling in 20 kilowatts from the grid, and the C rate of the battery is 0.15 C, 0.15 C. For those of you who understand batteries, you understand that that's an incredibly low C rate and it's on the charging side, which is when you degrade the battery the most. And so if you start to consider the kind of characteristics of the battery here, you start to come up with a model for the longevity of it. And so generally speaking, these batteries will last about 11 years before they get down to 70%, right? So, and that's much, much longer than most of our customers even expect. So there's no issue. We don't expect battery replacements in the field. We've had products operating in the field for 6 years. We've never seen a battery replacement ever. And so that's really not a concern.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. There's a question. It speaks a little bit to the future, but there's people who are thinking about this probably. I cover a lot of alternative types of energy storage on my channel. We talk about how the future is going to be open, and there's going to be so much demand that it's hard to fully understand exactly what will take. But in the comment section, Observer asks, what do you think of having a flow battery where the liquid cathode anode pair is only charging and the other side output cell? So a flow battery, or some of these various other types of technologies. Is that something in the future, maybe future models of the boost charger could incorporate?
Yeah, it's a good question because I've actually looked at flow batteries. The problem ends up being their density, right? That's where it boils down to. Again, back to the vision of the future, I believe that I think you're going to have ultra fast charging again on convenience stores and gas stations and parking lots, shopping malls, etc. These sites really value their parking spots, right? There are dollars associated with parking spots. A flow battery would be the size of the boost charger itself and only be able to provide 25 kilowatt hours of capacity, right? That's the density. So the density is probably, a 10th to a 20th of that of the NMC technology that we use in the lithium-ion batteries today.
Got it.
So if I had a massive site, I would consider a flow battery, but not for, but it's too large for most of the commercial sites that we see.
That makes sense. Yeah. And in, stationary installations like that, it's potentially possible, but depending on the site, there might or might not be space for it. Like a conventional grocery store or something, there might not be enough room to have boxes off on the side for storage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
back to this, picture, this battery pack fits within the boost charger, right? It is part of the actual structure of the boost charger. And that's important because again, every parking space is considered like revenue for these customers, and they cannot give up a separate several parking spaces for a 20-foot shipping container of batteries or a 40-foot shipping container of batteries. It has to be compact.
Yeah, that's very true. But I mean, as far as like your technology goes, in the future, there's no reason why whatever energy storage medium you choose could be supported. It would just be a matter of future models and wherever the market heads or whatever breakthroughs happen and wherever the market goes, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So this, I think, you wanted to maybe we should talk quickly about the generator product as well. You have any slides on that? So the company
Not
also
Yeah.
does diesel generator alternative, right?
hmm Yep, that's right. So if you go to our website, you can see that product. I don't have any slides on it right now, but the product really is it's a mobile battery system that replaces diesel generators, and we've used it in really some interesting applications. We've replaced diesel generators for food trucks. That's one of our biggest applications. So if you go to Google's campus, Google operates a lot of food trucks across their campus in Mountain View. Most of those food trucks are not being powered by our mobile battery systems, not by a diesel generator, right? Obviously, a really it's an application that makes a lot of sense to people, right? If you go to the Red Cross, right, our mobile battery systems rather than a diesel generator, right? So there's a lot of really interesting applications, and plus, of course, the most obvious ones: construction and film production, event. We provided them to Coachella for a number of years. So that product has really a lot of core applications. It's obviously not as much of a growth market as EV charging is today, but you're going to see electrification across all of those industries and all of those spaces, and Freewire makes power solutions to enable that.
So what are some? Yeah, I was thinking like music concerts and stuff. And currently, your generator is more for the commercial application.
That's right.
But as you know, we talked about this a little bit on our call. Are there any plans for future like more like commercial consumer side products as far as battery storage or generators in the event of like power outages and stuff?
So no, and it's not because the technology isn't there. The technology certainly is there. The fact is, the company that I've built is really set up for as a B2B company. We really know how to work closely with these large industrial customers, and sell them products that they consider critical infrastructure. And that means they have to go through processes with us, such as factory audits, supply chain audits, full technology validation. And these processes take years in some cases, right? So we're set up as a company to be able to supply to those large organizations and not to the consumer level. But consumers are the end users of our products, right? So when we're deploying our mobile battery systems on with food trucks, right? It's that food truck operator that's using it. When we're supplying them um, um, to construction sites, it's the construction workers that are using them every single day. And these products, this boost charger, all of the consumers on this, or all of the viewers on your show are going to use them eventually, right? So we have to take that into consideration. We have to design products that we think are beautiful, that we think are that are obviously very safe, and are very reliable. But we're never going to be selling to consumers though directly.
Got it. Um, is there any mention of like price? Like, I guess it would be up to the operator. So if you sell one of these to like a 7-Eleven, like what kind of a price could a consumer expect per
Yeah, I
kilowatt
mean, I
hour?
can tell you, I can tell you what I'm seeing in the field. So we have them deployed at a number of BP gas stations. So this is the AM/PM brand here in the California area, in Sacramento, Lodi, King City, Stockton, and so on and so forth. And on those sites, BP is charging 35 cents a kilowatt hour. 35 cents a kilowatt hour. That's actually more cost effective than any of the EVgo or Electrify America sites that you might see around that area, which those are hovering around 55 or 60 cents a kilowatt hour. When you actually bake in that kind of session fee and so on and so forth. And where are 35 cents a kilowatt hour? The reason that BP is able to charge less is because their operating costs are so much lower. So the battery system inside here actually lowers their, as I mentioned, their energy costs by doing demand charge management and by doing time of use arbitrage. And so their operating costs are 70% lower than traditional charging infrastructure, which means they can pass those savings along to customers. So again, that's 35 cents a kilowatt hour. We think a lot of our customers are going to be passing on a lot of those operating cost savings to the driver, and that benefits everyone, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, there's questions about can we invest? You guys are actually already shipping products, right? You guys are already selling stuff. Yeah. So,
Oh yeah, yeah,
um,
we were revenue generating, significant revenues actually. Like I said, we have products deployed across 6 countries. We're shipping a pretty significant order right now to the UK with a very close customer of ours. Now we're over 100 employees now. I think 110 as of my last count. And the question of can you invest? I think it's at this point this is not this is not an angel funded endeavor, right? So our largest investors are private equity firms like Riverstone. It's BP has led or invested in every single financing round we've had. ABB is an investor. So I think it's probably not feasible for individual investors to invest. But if anybody's part of a venture fund or a private equity firm, I mean, you can easily contact me.
a big thank you to Johnny O for your super chat. Really appreciate it, Johnny. You rock. I remember you've been very generous in the past as well. Really appreciate you. Yeah, part of what makes me really bullish on Freewire is a lot of people sit back and say, "Oh, it's not possible. How are you going to charge all these EVs?" And they look at the grid and they say, don't bother. And what you've done is forget future pie in the sky. Today, here's a path to getting there right now. We can use current infrastructure limitations, and we can actually install for cheaper. Like as you mentioned, if you're going to install a DC fast charger, the cost. I read an article that said Tesla pays between like $300,000 and $700,000 for a supercharger station with permitting and all the infrastructure upgrades and all that has to go into it. So even though yours has a battery pack built into it compared to like a Blink charger or an Electrify America, you can still as a business owner install it for way cheaper, and you're getting fast charging for EV customers. So this is how we attack problems today instead of kicking it down the road and saying we can't do it, we shouldn't do it. You're finding solutions today, which is what I absolutely love. Here's a question for you. I was just thinking about, which is how are you going to integrate into some of these charging applications like PlugShare, right? So PlugShare shows me like 1772s around or public charging stations, Electrify America or Blink, ChargePoint. So how do I find a Freewire? If I'm a business owner, I have a 7-Eleven and I put in 3 of your chargers, how do I get that visibility on a platform like PlugShare?
Oh yeah, well, I mean we're on PlugShare today.
Oh, you are?
So yeah. So PlugShare is an aggregation tool, right? It aggregates where charging stations are and some of the data about them. We're live on PlugShare. In fact, we submit our data directly to PlugShare, so you can see if the unit's available or not, and you can see what power levels it's operating on. So we're on PlugShare. We also work with all the most major charging networks, right? So we're on the EV Connect network today. We're going to be on the Greenlots network pretty shortly. And down the line, you'll probably see us on networks like ChargePoint and Electrify America and EVgo as well. Remember, these are just network operators. We're the technology OEM behind what they're deploying in the field. But they're network operators. So they manage their networks and they allow you to have a map on your app. They allow you to put your credit card into that app so you can start the charging session remotely, right? We integrate with those networks. And we have a platform called AMP, our asset management platform. That's really a core platform around pricing controls, access controls. It also does energy management. So we do demand charge management, time of use arbitrage, and that just natively APIs into an EV Connect or another networking app like that. So it's available today.
Very cool. So if I was on PlugShare, how would does it say Freewire or how, like, is
No,
there any?
because we're not the network, right? Just
Right,
like PlugShare won't say ABB,
right,
right, which is a
right,
supplier
right.
of charging stations. You would have to. So here's the thing, Ricky. I don't. The users shouldn't know that they're using a battery integrated charger,
Right.
right? If I've done my job correctly, you're going to get a fast charge every time you show up to the station, and you're not going to know that there's a battery inside there, and that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing, right?
Yeah, you're right.
That means it's worked. And so, there are ways to find it. I mean, if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, just look up all of the BP gas stations around here. There's a parking garage in San Francisco where we have 4 of them deployed. If you're in the San Diego area, I mentioned to you, there's a gas station not too far outside of San Diego that has units deployed. So, but you're not
I
going
have
to
to
be able to
message
search.
you about which one. I want to check it
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. So you're not going to be able to search directly for Freewire because again, we're not the network. We're not
Right.
the consumer
Okay.
facing brand. So, but more and more so as you go and you find fast chargers on these other networks, you're going to find that more and more folks are using Freewire boost chargers rather than a traditional, let's say, ABB charger.
Very cool. Big thank you to Marcel Carr, who is a big fan of ours, talks to us all the time. He says, great video as always. We appreciate you, Marcel. Thank you for that. I'm just trying to look at some other questions that we have here. Let's see. Okay. Varun Govind says, I think Tesla has inbuilt navigation to their own chargers, and other EVs can't use Tesla chargers yet. So I think the kind of question is, but again, as you mentioned, you're not the network, so really you'll just show up as a destination. And in the future, if I had a Ford Mach-E or a ID4 or something, the hope is that all of your FreeWire locations should show up as options. Part of it, I think. What do you think about like infrastructure in around like occupied, not occupied, out of commission, and having some sort of like a set rule and a standard around charging kind of status, if you will. That way, if I'm in a car, we could ping a network and say there are these 5 chargers here, and 4 of them are in use, one is not, one's out of commission. These are things that drive me crazy when I go to non-Tesla chargers currently. Is I got stranded at one I mentioned with my ID4 because they took me to a Electrify America station that was non-operable. Like the entire station was out. And I got stranded because I was like 30 miles of range left and 40 miles from either the next one or the last one. So, and I'm not really sure exactly what the question is. I'm not sure what you could do because again, you're not the network. But where do you see this industry going? Because as we go from, this is still kind of an early adopter stage for EVs, but let's say 5 years from now, we have millions and millions of EVs. What sort of standards do you think we need in terms of charging infrastructure and networks to really make it as smooth and seamless as like gasoline cars today?
Yeah, well, I mean, first we have to eliminate this concept of 2 different charging plugs, right? CHAdeMO and CCS, and Tesla being a separate proprietary standard. There are other standards, by the way, Ricky. In China, they're using GBT, right? So that concept of having different ports and different standards needs to go away entirely. So personally speaking, I think CHAdeMO needs to die. I know a lot of your viewers are going to be upset by me saying that because you may own a Nissan Leaf, and I get it. But for the good of the industry, we need to have one standard, and I think it needs to be CCS. And I have a number of technical reasons because I live in this, breathe this industry every single day. Why I say that. So it needs to be CCS. Tesla in the EU has already switched to CCS on their vehicles. So you just plug a CCS cable directly and natively inside the Tesla. There's no more proprietary standard. And so we need to go away from that. Second thing that needs to happen is that vehicle OEMs need to standardize the communication protocol. So even though there is a document that outlines how CCS should work and the communication between the charger and the vehicle, it's more of a guideline, and every single automotive OEM has designed it differently. I can guarantee you every single one is designed differently. So the biggest problem plaguing our industry, and the biggest reasons why a lot of charging sessions don't work for you and for your other viewers, is the interoperability between the charger and the vehicle. The vehicle sends a communication signal to the charger responds in a way that the vehicle didn't expect, the charging session doesn't start. And it changes every year. So the ID4 this year, it has a different communication protocol than the ID4 next year. And that's a big
Really?
problem in the industry. So yes, different. All the generations of Nissan Leaf are completely different in the way they talk to the charger, completely different. You need to code for it. And so interoperability is a big problem. We have the automotive OEMs coming to our facility almost on a weekly basis. I saw the ID4 and the ID3 on the US soil before most others did, because Volkswagen was in our facility testing their vehicles for interoperability on our chargers. Same thing with the Mustang Mach-E, same thing with some of the heavy duty trucks now. And so we need to standardize on a single plug we need the automotive OEMs to really standardize on the communication protocol so that there's not this interoperability challenge. And then the charging companies or the technology OEMs like a Freewire need to be good in providing and opening the data to aggregators like EV Connect and ChargePoint and PlugShare. So we report our data directly to PlugShare. So if our station is down, PlugShare will see that instantly, and you would know to not drive there. But a lot don't. A lot don't want that kind of data exposed. They don't want to show that, and so there needs to be some the OEMs need to be a little bit better. The technology OEMs, not the automotive OEMs, but the technology OEMs need to be better about exposing that data directly. If we can get to that point, then this is going to be really a seamless transition forward. Now, I just want to point out what a lot of people think, which is that the technology is broken or the hardware is broken. What I can tell you is that being inside this industry, the technology has improved dramatically over the last few years. I mean, dramatically. The hardware is mostly reliable at this point. I understand that some of the charging stations that a lot of you use are 2-3 years old because they were deployed years ago. The hardware has gotten very, very reliable. Now, that being said, the software has not improved dramatically. And that's where the biggest problems lie today. The interoperability, the charging sessions just constantly starting, stopping. I'm sure you've all seen it. And that's the problem the industry needs to solve to make things work well for you.
You well said. There's a question from Dusty Green. He says, what's the pay experience like? Like, how do I pay? And what's the UI like? Is there a screen for people who've used Electrify America, or like Tesla's is touchless? You just plug it in; it all happens on your car side. How does that all work?
Yeah, it's the largest screen in the industry. It's a 24-inch touchscreen. Really, really seamless experience. I'm in. I eat my own dog food, right? So I've been driving electric vehicles for 7-8 years now. I'm on my 12th electric vehicle. I can tell you that the experience in starting a charging session is by far the best experience of any charger in the field today. Mind the Tesla, because that is right. You don't need to plug to hit a button because they have that closed ecosystem. But in an open ecosystem, you need that screen. So 24-inch touch screen, very easy to use, big buttons, very seamless. The payment options, you can either pay via app if you're using EV Connect or one of the networking apps, or there's a credit card reader there that does tap or swipe or dip, right? So you can dip your card reader in, you can tap if you have NFC, or you can swipe your credit card the old-fashioned way. Also accept RFID cards if you have an RFID card. So every option possible for it to work.
Gotcha. Very good question. There's some questions about CCS in general. Some people like the CCS standard. Other people, Stefan says, CCS is a bad standard. There's too many problems with CCS on new cars. And Sar, who's one of our viewers as well, said, why do you consider CCS to be technically superior? I guess I can kind of start, and you can jump in as well. I'm not sure that I consider CCS technically superior or not. We talked about this a little bit before. One cool thing what Tesla does is Tesla's plug just has 2 leads on it, and it can handle like level 1 and level 2, which are AC. So you plug in from the wall and you're getting AC. The car sends the AC to the inverter on board the car to then send to DC to charge the battery. Or you can go to a supercharger. The same plug is very low profile and slim, very easy to handle. Now is sending DC that's already been inverted on the ground station right to the battery pack. And either way, it's all the same. Whereas on the CCS, it's kind of a 2-part plug, right? You got the AC bit on top, and then the DC fast charging prongs are on the bottom. So that leads to just a more generally more cumbersome, like it's just a little bit tougher to plug in. I'm not going to lie, than my Tesla is in my experience with those cars. This probably gets into kind of like the lightning adapter on your iPhone and your USB-C and all these various things. I'm not sure that I think anything is superior or not superior. And you can kind of get into the Tesla thing. We talked about this last week. But for me, I think we just need to all sit down and agree on a standard. We can't have Tesla doing one thing. We can't have every company doing their own thing. That would be madness. And we as an industry, like I always tell people, as much as I love Tesla, I like a world full of EVs more. I want there to be tons of companies making EVs and tons of people buying EVs. So to do that, this is one of those sticking points. It's just like imagine the internet without like TCP/IP or some of the standards that we have in place that allow us to address and to have websites and to know, no matter where you live or what browser you use, that youtube.com is youtube.com, right? So standards are really important. The European Union is far ahead of us in these ways. Like somebody mentioned that Teslas in EU already sell with a CCS plug because they won't let you get away with this stuff. I think I've heard iPhones as well have Type-C as opposed to the Lightning for the same reasons. You can't just go putting your own proprietary plug on things and charging $50 when they break, right? So what do you think about CCS? Is that the answer? Is there a new standard? And you've kind of talked about CCS2 in Europe and the US. Maybe you can kind of just shed some light on all that.
Yeah, and I didn't say CCS is technically the better standard, but it's the most accepted standard, right? More vehicles are coming out today, significantly more vehicles with CCS, with the CCS standard than with CHAdeMO. And so we have to move to one standard. And if it's going to be anything, it's going to be CCS at this point, period. Right? So it doesn't matter if it's more technically capable or not. It is accepted. We need to move to it, full stop. Now, is Tesla the more advanced standard from a technology standpoint? Absolutely. Passing both DC and AC over the same leads, that's great, right? That makes the cable thinner. That makes the plug easier to handle. That's fantastic. Now, the problem that a lot of folks in the industry have identified with it is we're not certain that UL can certify that, right? AC and DC passing over the same leads at high current, high power. Now, I wish they could, because that would make my life a lot easier. I could make smaller cables. I could make thinner cables that are better, easier to use. But CCS was designed the way it was because it works with every certification body, whether it be UL, whether it be CE, whether it be the Japanese standards and certification bodies across the world. So you can easily certify this across the world. Not certain that you can with that Tesla cable. And then that's the problem the industry has identified. Now, should we solve that problem? Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's a ridiculous problem, and I hate having to deal with it, but it is what it is. At this point, CCS is just more accepted, and we should be switching over to it.
Well said. Somebody asked what the Rivian charging standard is. I believe they have a CCS standard as well.
Right.
Most the ID4 that I drove, the Mach-E, everything else I've driven pretty much has it.
Yeah.
So the questions then abound about should the government get involved and regulate this, as opposed to letting companies do this, right? To sell a car in the U.S., you must an EV in the U.S., you must comply. Why don't you answer that? I don't know where I am on that one.
They already effectively do, right? So
right.
The federal government doesn't specifically regulate any of these standards, but the California Air Resources Board does. And the California Energy Commission in some ways does as well. And so California is the largest market in the U.S. I mean, you're going to conform to California standards if you want to sell cars in the U.S. That's period, right? So they effectively regulate it by enforcing some standards. Unfortunately, they're still a little bit slow to adapt, but they're getting there. And you're going to see more and more requirements put out that basically that back up what I said, which is sticking to a single standard, et cetera. So yes, they do already.
Yeah. So two things I'll add there. I'm trying to read what people were saying. One is, I kind of worry about let's say we went from USB 1 to 2 to USB-C. One of the great things that governing body did was backward compatibility. The USB 3, USB A type 3 cable, that was backward compatible all the way back to computers from 20 years ago that had a USB input on it. That was remarkable. Finally, we now have a new plug, the C plug, right? So the minute you do that, my MacBook has a Type-C port on it. It renders a bunch of stuff obsolete. Do you fear that might happen in the industry where, let's say a couple of years from now, something like you're describing where we all get together and we say, okay, CCS is part of the problem with CCS, I think, and you hit on the head, which is it has to comply with the entire world's laws. And when you have to do that, the end result is a bigger cable. That's just how it is.
That's how it is.
Which is weird because do I need to be straddled with all that extra baggage? I'm never going to be charging in Japan, right? So those are kind of interesting questions, I think. But do do you see us maybe there'll be some standard, it'll be CCS3, and it'll completely be a different shape and it'll be different, and we'll need adapters and dongles. Do you see kind
I
of?
hope not. I hope not, because that would, at this point, there's already a baseline charging infrastructure installed all across the place, and switching out cables for this or that, it would just be a pain and an extra cost for the industry, which that cost is going to get passed on to drivers, right? Let's just be frank about it. So no, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we stick to the standards that we have. Do I know? No, I don't know, certainly. Is there going to be something significantly more technologically advanced that can really change the game and change my mind? Sure, there might be, right? I just don't see that yet. The other thing, Ricky, I have to say is, I'm getting to the end of my time here. I gotta head off soon, but I'd love to see if you have any closing questions or thoughts.
Sure. One question that I did get was, is there any can CCS support like vehicle to grid or vehicle to home? Is there like backward flow? Is there any limitations there compared to other plugs or anything? It should support it, right?
Yeah, they do support it. They do. ISO 15118 is this, and some V2G, some of these more advanced features that we're developing right now and enabling it absolutely supports it. Although vehicle to grid, for fast charging applications doesn't make any sense, right, Ricky? If you're there to fast charge your vehicle, you're there to fast charge your vehicle. You're not there to wait for someone to play with your battery capacity. What we believe is
it doesn't really apply here. That's more for like at home applications, or like, if you're plugged in at work or something. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. In that case, you'd have a J1772 cable, right? Not necessarily CCS. So for public charging and fast and ultra fast charging applications, this is the right model. Having a battery integrated into the charger and doing chargers to grid and enabling those energy services, that's a more effective model.
All right. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, Arcady. I think next time I'm in the Bay Area, I'd love to pick your brain or maybe do a little factory tour or something and see the company firsthand. Thank you for joining us. I think that pretty much does it for us with Arcady. He has to drop off the call. I might stay on a little bit longer, but Arcady, any any closing comments or anything?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for listening to this today. I think this really is the next generation of charging infrastructure. We're solving the problems that exist today, right? Which is the utility and grid infrastructure behind the charging station. Those are the real problems. But we're also solving the problems that where the industry is going to face in the next 2 or 3 years, which is how do you manage all of the energy consumption these vehicles require? And the battery is really what manages that. So we spent years developing the technology. We now have it deployed in again, all over the country and all over the world. And we're happy to kind of tell you more about it and happy to have your support. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, pretty easy. It's my first name, Arcady, at freewiretech.com. And happy to just chat about it, because I love what we do, and I love folks. If you have any good ideas, more than happy to talk about it.
Thank you so much. I will stay on. Arcady, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us on your Sunday. Appreciate you, man. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
So I'll stay on for a couple of minutes and see if there's any other questions that people have. I wanted to share this company because as Arcady was telling me about the tech that they use, I thought it was really, really fascinating. One of the things I've always talked about on this channel is I like to get all the people's questions. Like there's some questions and talk. John mentioned Tesla's charging, how it's been bulletproof, and why on earth would they change it? I want to get into that because he makes a great point. But all of you guys and your questions and your comments really drive this channel, man. I hope you guys understand that. You guys give us so much to think about. And I love the fact that like we have a bunch of like anti-EV haters. We have people who love EVs and we have the whole gamut of viewers, and I wouldn't want to lose any of you because there's certain perspectives that we can gain from all of it. So the point I've heard over and over about, can you charge all these EVs? I hope we've shown with this company, what they're doing, how easily, yes, we absolutely could, because the key really is to cut the spiking out. Like when I go to a charger and I plug in my car, I go from the grid is needing to provide 0 to 200 kilowatts and back again in 45 minutes. That is really, really hard on a grid to power. The next time, for the Tesla drivers out there, the next time you're at a supercharger station, look around and in your head, do the math. How many kilowatts is this station pulling? It's massive. And people have mentioned newer Tesla chargers are going to have mega packs. They have solar. That Fireboss station, anybody who lives in California, you got to go to that Fireboss station in California. I think it's one of the biggest right now. It is covered in what feels like a mile of solar. And during the day when you plug in there, you kind of feel like I'm literally being run by the sun, which is which is like a dream. I don't know exactly why, but that makes me like just wildly happy. But short of that, we're going to need chargers all over the place. John kind of mentioned, why would I want to go back? Observer, I'll hop on the Discord later. I'm not able to get there right now. But one of the things I've said is we have to have charging in a lot of different locations. For you on your Tesla road trips, it sounds like you haven't had an issue. I have once been up into the mountains in Big Bear, and because of the cold weather, having to run the heater and going uphill up the mountain, it was really hairy one time. And the fact of the matter is, when I pulled over to get food or a gallon of milk for my kids or something, if there was a FreeWire charger sitting there I could plug into, or any charger, that would help. And in the future, we don't want to be like, oh, I'm a Tesla person, so I charge here or there. We don't want that. We want it to be like gas stations. Could you imagine that somebody mentioned, oh, I need to find a Honda gas station or a Toyota gas station? That's madness. We cannot do that. And to your point about, well, why should Tesla change their plug? Should everybody else adopt ours? Well, then Tesla has to open it up as a standard. People have to agree on it. I'm fine with that. I love my Tesla charging cable. It is so much more lower profile than the CCS that supports both AC and DC fast charging. So there's a lot of conversations to be had, but I'm glad that we're having it. Hopefully, if you guys are having fun, I'm open to keeping the stream up for another 20 minutes or so to answer questions. Fire away, please. Robert, thank you for your super chat. He says, if Tesla will share the superchargers in Europe, I'll buy EV, no problem. My only problem until now was the availability of chargers. Kia, here I go. If Tesla does it. Well, I'll tell you this. The rate at which we'll be building out electric vehicle charging in the next 2 years is going to boggle your mind. So Robert, if you don't feel where you live there's enough charging infrastructure, again, remember, you charge at home for the most part. Just wait. In the next year or two, it's going to be incredible how much new charging infrastructure will be built out. And that's the other part too, John, is as great as Tesla's lead is, Tesla's going to be the smallest network in 5 years. Everybody else is, it can't be Tesla versus everybody else. If Blink and ChargePoint and EVgo and all the other companies are building out networks, their network is going to be far more massive than Tesla's. And to be honest, I'd rather Tesla spend their money on building great cars, not charge stations at almost $1 million a location. So long term, it might not even really be sustainable. So also imagine if you live in LA, people have to wait in lines to get to superchargers because there's just so many cars. There's probably the highest density of anywhere is probably LA. So for that reason, we need to be able to have access to all charging networks and stuff. John says, I live in Central California and there are 4 different chargers within 15 miles of me. That's why you feel this way, John. But if you come take a road trip down to Los Angeles and try to charge, and you'll start to realize, holy crap, we would need, it doesn't scale. Tesla couldn't build N superchargers per number of cars sold. It doesn't scale up. At some point, Tesla has to go, the rest of you jokers who we had to drag kicking and screaming are finally doing your jobs and building out charging infrastructure. We can stop because you've done it. That's the way to do this thing. Tesla's not going to put a charger in every location on Earth. It would cripple the company. It's just not doable. What they did, to someone's point, is they said, we're not going to wait around. We're going to jumpstart and do it ourselves. But now, eventually, people need to catch up. Let's see what else we got. David says, excellent presentation and topic. Thank you. This was a video that I wanted to do for a while. And when I talked to Arcady, I thought this would be perfect to just do it live. And I hope the grid stabilization impact, the fact that you don't have to redo infrastructure and have all that extra hardware, you could just plug into existing lines that every restaurant and gas station has currently. I hope the value proposition was clear enough with what Freewire is doing. Yeah, what I find fascinating is everybody falls on a spectrum of EVs are not ready for me. I live somewhere rural. There's no charging. I drive too far, to 100% EVs are 100% good for me. I live in San Diego, and I mentioned I've done 12 road trips to the Bay Area and back. It's about 500 miles one way, and so 1,000-mile round trip. Done it 12 times in my Tesla, and it's not even a thing. I don't even worry about it. It's as easy to do as any gas car. But that is, again, in California. It's warm. I remember the one trip we did in December when it was colder and we had the heat running. My range, we had to charge one extra time. So I completely get it. And this is why I think we should have this conversation. Because the more we think about this stuff up front, the less we'll be stuck with, what a bad charge standard, or what a, less bad decisions, if you will. Cheryl asked a great question. She says, are they still installing level 2 chargers? I had to get a van plug-in hybrid, level 2 only. Here's my personal take. Level 2 charging needs to die right away. Like, we should not be installing any more level 2. Whatever level 2 we have now is fine. Because the reality is, if I was on a road trip and I saw a level 2 charger, that's basically as good as nothing to me. Because I would have to sit around for 6 hours to charge. And that would kill my trip, right? So that's part of the misleading thing. A lot of companies, I'm not pointing out anybody in particular, but like some of the charging network companies, they'll boast about this really big network coverage map. We have EV chargers all over. But what they don't tell you is what percentages of those are level 2, meaning they're AC level 2 charging, 10 to 15 kilowatt speed, because those are not going to work on a road trip. They only work if you're going to the movies or going to get groceries, and you can just plug in and just charge. Why not? So to my mind, every new company should be building DC fast charging only. Without exception. I guess you can offer like a level 2 for cars that can't support level 3, but also that I don't think any new car coming in the future will lack DC fast charging. I was in an Arcady Moto, which only supports level 2 charging, so we will still need that. But that car would charge up in like 3 hours, even on level 2, because it's such a small battery pack. Yeah, Jeep XJ says it needs to die at rest stops. I agree. Level 2 is only good for overnight destination charging. That's exactly true. Hotel parking lots should have level 2s. That's fine. You plug in, you go to bed, you have a full charge the next day. But like destination, charging stops, grocery stores, or places you stop along a route, especially on the 5 in California, they got to be level 2. No, so Cheryl asked, but there's still a lot of level 2 only cars. No, so there's a lot of level 2 infrastructure that's not going to go away, and there's cars that are not going to go away for a while. There's no adapter, because what the car would have to do is accept a DC fast charge that bypasses the car's built-in inverter, and instead the inverter happens on this big box on the ground, and over the wire is DC, like 150 kilowatt DC. And so if your car can't support that, you don't have thermal management, like Leafs and the older cars just can't support that level of fast charging. Ray Johnson says, well then Tesla and all the charging companies need to cover Australia, because in Central we have mostly 3 mile an hour, 32 amp chargers. Yeah, Australia is an interesting scenario. It's a very challenging region to cover, because you've got we got some dense urban populations like Sydney, Melbourne, and stuff, but then you've got vast hundreds of miles of complete wilderness. So Australia will be challenging, but what you guys could do that live in Australia, buy EVs, show your local dealerships that you're buying electric vehicles, show the demand, and the supply will follow, as I would say. And also, one thing I didn't get a chance to get into with Arcady, we talked last week. He mentioned about chargers being down for maintenance, which you guys have anybody who has an EV, leave me a comment right now. I'll wait for 1 minute. Anybody who drives an EV, how frequently, like what percentage of the time you go to a charging location, Tesla's included, that happens to Tesla as well, where the charging station is out of commission. For whatever reason, it says out of service, right? How often does that happen to you? I'd say it's a fair amount. And I asked him about this, and I said, why does this seem to happen? It does happen at gas stations too. And the first thing Arcady told me is this actually, the rate of incident for gas stations being out of commission is higher than electric vehicle charging stations. The difference though is at a gas station, you have 20 pumps at everywhere you go. So if there's 2 out of commission, nobody even blinks an eye. But if you have 3 stalls at the place you go, and one of them is out of commission, it feels like the end of the world. It feels like such a problem. So I think part of it is just a little bit psychological, but I'm kind of curious how that goes. But what he mentioned was, for the most part, the challenge with the charging is not the hardware. So if you ever have a charger out of commission, odds are not the hardware, it's the software. And he mentioned this. Electrical vehicle charging software is in its infancy and it has a long way to go. I mentioned when I charged my Mach-E that I had a Windows crash screen. I saw it said like Windows Embedded Edition, and I saw the BIOS American microcomputer. I saw this like BIOS screen. I saw the Windows splash screen, and I saw the computer come back up. It was bizarre, right? I can't imagine these are running on Windows. That's a crazy, terrible idea. Freewire runs on Linux, which is the right way to go, or some other embedded thing on ARM or whatever the case might be. It's still in its infancy, and we will eventually get better at the software part of it and make this process better. Because I'm not going to lie, right now, my experience with Electrify America was mostly good, but I had two situations where it was like, why aren't you starting to charge? Like you plug in your Tesla and you walk away and you're pretty confident when you get back it's charged. And if it isn't, you grab your phone and it'll tell you. But with Electrify America, a couple of times what I've had is you plug it in, and Arcady alluded to this. You plug it in and it feels like it's charging, but then it says fail to charge, unplug and replug. For some reason, it can't just say failed, let me try again. You have to like physically remove the plug and plug it back in. And if you're having a lunch, the last thing you want to do is deal with that kind of stuff. All software for the most part, and we will figure it out. So there's still some talk about flow batteries, I think. Talk about India. Yeah, India is an interesting segment. They have a lot of infrastructure to work on, but India is a huge market, and I really hope they get into electric vehicles very soon because it would be game-changing for India. And talking about flow batteries, we have a video on flow batteries coming up the next month. I don't know exactly when, so subscribe, stay tuned. We will absolutely be covering that. So John says, my point is if you live in Southern California, why do you need a supercharger less than 100 miles? Because you should be charging at home. John, again, I'm not trying to pick on you here. A better approach might be to be sympathetic to different people's use cases, right? Maybe you have a life that doesn't require it. I'm a real estate agent. I show houses. I drive 200 miles and I need a lunch break to go charge my car 5 miles from my house because I need to have it fully charged to come back. I forgot to charge. A million things. It doesn't really matter. Rather than telling people how to be, what I find works better is understand that people have different use cases, and we have to be ready to support that. Because as much as it's clearly the EVs and a Tesla is perfect for you, that's great. Until everyone feels that way, they're not going to buy EVs, and that's what I think about. What I think about is how do we get the rest of people who do have that concern. Also, I talked with a Lyft or Uber driver who said the same thing. They'll drive their Uber with their Tesla, which is so maintenance-free, it's incredible. And then they go to a supercharger, plug it in for 35, 40 minutes while they have lunch, and then go drive another 300 miles and then go home and charge it overnight. But that one charging stop 5 miles from their house is crucial to their business because without it, they're not driving Uber, right? So everyone is different, is my point. LA to SF might be the easiest road trip in the world. I agree. If LA, San Diego, even LA, San Francisco, easy as can be. Easy as can be. So Ray Johnson says, you want to talk to Simon Hackett about flow batteries and IT from Redflow. Ray, can you email me? I would love, I don't really have easy access to notes right now, but email me or message me on Twitter. I'd love to make sure that we do that when we get to the flow battery video for sure. Mason Matthews says EV Go touchscreens go black when the sun shines on them directly and they overheat. I've seen that. Yeah, it's we have to really nail this down. It's really important that we nail charging stations down. And somebody had mentioned about the payment gateways and stuff. One thing I think that will happen is there should be a protocol, car and charger payment stuff is all set up, it should be really seamless. I think that will happen in the next year or two. Varun says, how will budget low-cost electric scooters or bikes charge on road trips? Is adding a CCS or DC plug viable? If the battery pack was, like 5 or 10 kilowatt hours, something like that, even a level 2 charger will take care of that in like an hour of time. So probably no fast charging, no DC fast charging for smaller stuff. I guess it would depend on the battery size, right? Do the math, and you got to figure that charging has to be in less than an hour. So kind of back solve that way. But I think, yeah, you're right. There should be. We're planning a couple of trips. To Arkimoto invited us to a little event they're having at the end of July. So that would be in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. That would be a really crazy road trip, right? That's about 1,000, maybe 1,100, 1,200 miles, I think. So again, to the point John made, I'm not worried about it. I know I can make it in my Tesla, no problem. So I might be attending that. Let me know if you guys are curious about Arkimoto or have questions and stuff. I can definitely ask them. But that road trip should be pretty doable, I think. This gets to something that makes me really mad about Tesla, which is there's no CCS adapter for Tesla vehicles in North America, and that drives me bonkers. There has been one time when I was too far from a Tesla stop, bad planning, kids, unexpected stops, some other things, that I could have been at a Electrify America stop and charge, and I did not, and I could not, because I didn't have the adapter. That's absurd. There's zero reason for that. We need to figure this out. Tesla has a CHAdeMO adapter, which is like a $500 thing, which is bonkers, but at least you have the option. I don't like CHAdeMO personally. I think, to Arcady's point, CHAdeMO will die off, and people who have it will have to get an adapter, but I don't think future cars will ever come with CHAdeMO again. But yeah. So Ben Pena says, how about the wonderful Aptera, no worries charging? The Aptera is so efficient that the same amount of sun energy can take you further, so as a result, you might be able to drive 40 or 50 miles per day just from solar recharging. That's a company that I'm working with. They're pretty busy right now, but I'm hoping to do a tour and to get my hands on the car. So that should be fun. 47 Solar, the Arkimoto event, is not public. It's kind of a celebration day that they're having, and they're going to have a little bit of press, I think. Ray Johnson, thank you for the tweet. I will check out that information, and I'll be sure to incorporate that when we get to making that video. Kay saying, thank you so much for your super chat. I really appreciate you, man. He says, is a EV charge station, sandwich restaurant be a viable business? I'll tell you what, if you already have a sandwich shop and you want to put some charging stations in front, I think that's kind of a fun thing to do. The Fireball station, where Tesla has their biggest station, right, like from the view when you're charging the car, the next shop right across the street is McDonald's, and they have huge banners that are saying, come recharge on a McSandwich, whatever, chicken. I'm not a big McDonald's person. Come recharge yourself while your Tesla's charging. So they make it a fun thing. Like, they know you're here charging your car, come across the street. So increasingly, as people, charging cafes, right? If you tell me, okay, I'm on a trip and I have to stop for food, your food has to still be good. But your restaurant, if it's really nice and it has a charging station, I can plug in my car while I'm eating. Yes, I'll take that one. Why not? So yeah, I think it would be fun to do that. Dusty Green had mentioned that the Arkimoto, which is a 3-wheeler, would be the ultimate like tow-along car if you're RVing, like in a toy hauler RV that has room for like a little garage to pull a car in. The Arkimoto would be the perfect car for that, and I agree. I actually told their chief strategy officer, their CSO, I told him that, Dusty, and I told him it was your idea. So we'll make a video on it in the future. I appreciate you, Kay-sang. Appreciate you. Tom Bolton says, curious if military will incorporate charging ability into on-base housing or install charging stations on the installation. I think if you're thinking that they'll offer it as an amenity for their sailors or their arm, for their troops, probably not. The military is probably not going to do that. But if they need to build out infrastructure because their next fleet of cars and their little personal transit vehicles are all EVs, then they'll be forced to update. And ideally, they'll open it up to personal use as well. So I'd say that would be longer timeline, like 10 years from now. RC DIY says, how much is a DC fast charging station? I think the slowest DC fast charging is about 50 kilowatt, which is still almost 3 times faster than any level 2 charging, and about 5 times faster than my level 2 charging in my garage. And that goes all the way up to Tesla's is 150 to 250. And Electrify America has new charging stations that support 350. And I think the next generation of Teslas will be something even higher than that. Ray Johnson says, Tesla charging restaurant has 3 drink sizes, 18650, 2170, and 4680. That'd actually be pretty cool. That should absolutely be the name of, if I was making a coffee shop, those would be the sizes if I had one next to a supercharger station. It sounds like, Cheryl, you have the Pacifica hybrid, I think. It's a pretty cool car. I think it has like 20 or 30 miles of pure electric range. And so if you're driving less than that, you're driving all electric. And I understand we still need more EVs. There's really not a van equivalent yet. There's not really a truck. The trucks are coming. Van is a good one, a full-size SUV. You got to be patient. These new models are going to come. And the more of us adopt these cars, like John has mentioned, he's already got 2 Teslas. The more of us buy EVs, we'll force these automakers' hands to invest more in it, right? If you keep buying gas cars, you're not incentivizing them properly. All right, a couple more minutes. I think I'm going to wrap this up here. So any final super chat questions or anything else, fire them now. I will address it. But this was fun. I'm hoping that it was worthwhile for you. If you guys have ideas of how I can improve these live streams to bring more value to you, please don't be shy. Let me know. I want to keep getting better at this and keep bringing you value from cool, smart people doing cool stuff that maybe you hadn't heard of. I hadn't heard of Freewire until a month ago. And when I heard about their approach, I was immediately thinking, that is so brilliant. I actually wanted to buy one and put one in my driveway for EV buyers who could just drive by and fast charge near my house. It's really cool. Cheryl says, I'm rooting for Canoe. Yeah, Canoe sounds like it's a very promising company. I'd love to know more about them. I'll make sure our marketing person at the company, Claudia, who's in the chat, reaches out and maybe see if we can get some access to their stuff. Gary says, right on, Ricky. I appreciate you, Gary, as always. This is probably pretty indicative. Stefan says, the CCS standard is an 8-lane road, but if you only have to support 2, but it's not definitive what the lanes do. Yeah, we'll talk. I'll do a whole video on just that. 47 Solar says, Ricky, are you getting a Cybertruck? So I have a Cybertruck reservation, and I was really excited about it. And I don't know because I have some time to wait. But you guys know I quit my job, and I'm doing this full time. So I have really tried to bring down our costs and our expenses and really make sure that we don't run out of runway while we're growing the brand and the company as we go. For that reason, I'm going to wait and see. But the good news is I think my reservation, I wasn't very early. It'll be another year. And hopefully the channel's blowing up and we're doing big things. And I take all you guys' feedback and I make better videos. And yes, I would love to get a Cybertruck because of that 500 miles of range. That's what I love. Ben Pena says, when is the next live show? How about this? I'll flip it around. Why don't you guys let me know what stuff we should do? If you have like CEOs that you'd like me to get in touch with, like for example, Mark Frunmeyer, who's the CEO of Arcimoto, is a very good friend of mine. We talk all the time. I could do a show with him about Arcimoto, and I think he'd be happy to be on. Or if you have other ideas, let us know, and we will do live streams. And I'll give you more of a heads up next time. I apologize. This week well, I'll share this with you guys. You guys are here. You guys are our fans. We had a little issue where our sponsor for our video that was supposed to go out on Thursday, their promotion, their event wasn't happening until next week. So we had to punt that video, and it kind of shuffled everything around on us, but we'll get there. We'll do more of these. Lester says, thank you, Ricky. Great show. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Gary said, you demand, Ricky. Guys, I appreciate you. You guys are why we do this. So I'm a small part. And the like situation, someone tell me where we are with likes. I don't actually know. I don't have an up-to-date number. Let me see if I can pull something up. 150. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. 47 Solar has a super chat and says, for your Cybertruck. Man, I appreciate you, 47 Solar. You're awesome. You've been with us for a very long time. I'm gonna get a 47 Solar sticker and put it on my Cybertruck one day when I get it. How about that? I appreciate it. Observer says, I guess mostly I'm going to miss the vice versa because the time has changed. Yeah, Observer, you're very connected to us. I apologize for the change in time there, but we think we could get to new viewers in India and in Europe and some other places who always tell us they can't watch because of our timing. And who knows? Maybe we'll figure out a system where we could try to make everybody happy. It is very tough. Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps it up, I think, for us. Thank you guys, all of you, for your super chats. They are greatly appreciated when we do these live streams. You obviously know I'll give people who super chat our highest priority in terms of questions and stuff, but your support is directly funding the show. We have a couple of trips planned. We're going to go to a windmill museum and do a video about kind of the history of wind turbines over the years. And you know, these things take time and money, and that's why your support is so greatly appreciated. Speaking of which, I'll end on this note. If any of you guys want to be Rockstar supporters and join us on Patreon, for example, Dusty, RCDIY, I've seen some other people. We have Observer. You guys are all on our 2-Bit Tribe, which is what we call our members on Patreon and our channel members. So Bong Hollywood, you see a little icon next to his name. Well, he's a YouTube channel member. That's why he has that designation. And we all have a Discord where we talk and we plan stuff. Observer has done an amazing job of laying out a video on carbon capture technology. Observer, you're gonna need to chat soon, because I think what we need to do now is make it a script. But these guys do tons of idea finding, and we all get to chat about cool tech and just generally goof around and have fun. We will do live streams together, or video chats like on Zoom, where all of us can contribute, not just my big old head. And that's all part of our community. We will be doing giveaways pretty soon here, maybe next week. And the support just directly helps support our show, because YouTube is unpredictable. Who knows if our next video does well or not? But your support here really goes a long way. And we will keep reaching out to companies doing cool stuff. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your Sunday morning here in California, or whatever time it is where you are. I appreciate all of you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope we covered ideas. John 209, you were very vocal. Thank you for bringing up all your ideas and comments and stuff. I hope we covered some of it. I hope we gave you some stuff to think about. You gave us stuff to think about for sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. Have a great rest of your day. We'll catch you guys soon enough. And we'll have a couple of videos this week. So subscribe, hit the bell icons and stuff. We got some really fun videos coming out this week. So till then, peace out. We'll see you guys later.